One light, two lights, three lights, four lights, five lights, and it's go, 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 go!
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Formula One Talk, and the latest race of the season took place at the Bahrain International Circuit in Sakir. Let's go over the race review. To begin with, McLaren were in trouble as Stoffel van Dorn didn't start due to problems with the engine. Honda really do have to pick up the pace now and seriously think about what they're doing. More on that later on. Good start from Sebastian Vettel. Hamilton initially had a good getaway, but the second phase of the start really didn't do him any favours. He fell behind both Vettel and pole sitter Valtteri Bottas. His first pole in Formula One on a 1:28.7. Vettel was hounding Bottas by lap 2. Bottas just couldn't seem to pull away, and he was holding up the field, inwards of the first 6 or 7 laps. By lap 9, Kevin Magnussen was out with problems with his clutch, I do believe. Lap 10, Bottas struggling with his tyres. Apparently they had high pressures, and in Bahrain, in any circuit really, that's very dangerous. Vettel decided to use that time to come into the pits at the end of lap 10. A lap later, Max Verstappen pit. He came out, tried to turn the first corner. He couldn't brake the car. He had rear brake failure, according to Red Bull, specifically Christian Horner, who was speaking to the commentary team at the time. So that was Verstappen out. He was really angry with the car, kicking the barriers as he walked through. And it's understandable. He's a young man, he's a young driver, and he just wants to do as well as possible. He's not going to get anywhere doing this. Lap 13, Raikkonen pitted, and then an incident between Carlos Sainz and Lance Stroll took both of them out. Stroll was out straight away, and you can see the damage to the side of the car when they were lifting both cars out via the cranes. Debris on the track caused the safety car to come out. Bottas and Hamilton pitted, as did Ricciardo. Hamilton seemed to impede Ricciardo as they both entered the pit lane. That was on lap 13. By the time they went around with the safety car, there was an incident investigation message on the bottom of the screen, so Hamilton was in a bit of trouble. By lap 21, Hamilton was found to have fully impeded Ricciardo on the way into the pit, so he got a 5-second time penalty, which was either added at the end of the race or to the next pit stop. So we were interested to see when and if Lewis was going to get this penalty. Obviously he was going to get the penalty, but we didn't know when. Lap 16, the safety car came in. Lap 17, Alonso of McLaren squabbled in the midfield. Went on his radio to his race engineer saying that it's the worst engine he's ever driven in Formula One. There's no power to it whatsoever. It's easily the weakest. By first couple of practice sessions in Melbourne back in the first Grand Prix, they were talking like 110 brake horsepower deficit to the Mercedes engine, the Mercedes Works engine. So, but he's saying like they were 300 metres behind him, and that's talking about the Renault and maybe the Toro Rosso who were battling with him at the time. 300 metres behind him at the start of the straight, and they both took him by the end of the straight. So that's something that Honda really do have to work on. Lap 24, Raikkonen passes Massa for 5th, I do believe, at the time. Lap 25, Alonso again complaining about that Honda engine, and let's be honest, with some justification, a little bit more on that at the end. Nothing really much happened after that. We're talking about half the race with no incident, really. Hamilton came in for his pit stop on lap 42, took his 5-second penalty, and got all of that sorted. And then after he came out, he was easily the quickest driver on the track. He catched and passed Bottas, and basically, that was more or less it. Sebastian Vettel, controlled the race after he came out in the lead. It was like classic Seb, to be honest. You could see that whatever Hamilton threw at him after he came in for his second pit stop, they all basically stopped twice, and Vettel had the measure of the Mercedes. So again, let's go over the race results. First, Sebastian Vettel, great pit stop by Ferrari earlier on. They could see that Bottas was holding up the field, and they brought him in, got the undercut, and basically, along with the safety car that hindered both Mercedes cars, drove a fantastic race, got his first place, second win of the season, and we got ourselves a championship on our hands, as long as one team doesn't dominate the race for development, if you see what I mean. Second place for Lewis Hamilton. I think if it wasn't for that 5-place grid penalty, I have to keep on saying that, 5-second penalty for impeding Ricciardo as they both entered the pit lane when the safety car came in. If it wasn't for that, Hamilton might have got Vettel at the end of the race. We really don't know. The Ferrari looked fast enough to defend, so we'll just have to wait and see, other races in the season to see if that truly is the case. Bottas with another third place. It's all that could be expected, really. It was a bit unfortunate for Bottas, but like I say, more on that in a moment or two. Raikkonen with fourth, Ricciardo fifth, Massa and the Williams quietly getting on with what he needed to do. Clearly showing up Lance Stroll at the moment. The experience is coming into play. However, basically with 6 cars better than the Williams, sixth is all that he can basically hope for, and that's if one of the 6 better cars, we're talking about the Ferrari, the Mercedes and the Red Bulls, if one of them goes out, he'll benefit. He'll be the first to benefit. Sergio Perez with another good points finish for Force India in 7th. Romain Grosjean gets his first points of the season in 8th for Haas. They're quietly getting on with it. Nico Hulkenberg scores his first 2 points for Renault, and Renault's first 2 points of the season. And Esteban Ocon scores his third 10th place finish in a row. So that's 3 single point finishes. Points finishes. You couldn't really ask for anything more, really. On with the Drivers' Championship now. First place, Vettel on 68. Hamilton second on 61. Bottas quite a way back on 38 in third. Raikkonen 34. Fifth place for Verstappen and 25. Sixth for Ricciardo 22. Seventh Massa 16. Eighth Perez on 14. Carlos Sainz 9th on 10. And Grosjean 10th on 4 points. Onto the constructors' standings now. Ferrari are ahead by just a couple of points, 102, 99 for Mercedes. Red Bull third on 47, Force India fourth on 17, 1 point ahead of Williams in fifth. Sixth place, Toro Rosso on 12, Haas on 8 points, and Renault 8th on 2 points, with Sauber and McLaren still to score. Fastest lap, Hamilton on a 132.7. So we're still talking about 4 seconds slower than low fuel times. That's the way it's going to be until they change the rules with regards to, refueling and things like that. So on with the checkered flag now, and another incredible win for Sebastian Vettel. And I say incredible, it seems as though that tends to be the case. It's now a shock when Mercedes don't win, and it's going back to the old days of, if a team is so dominant then why aren't they winning every Grand Prix? Well, it's a mere fact that I think Ferrari are hungry this year. They need a better season this year, and already they've had a better season than they've had last year. If they don't get any more race wins in 2017, then it's already a better season because they've had 2 race wins. Last year in 2016, they didn't get a single race win and they just had the odd podium. So already it's a better season, even if they don't get any more wins, which of course they will do. It's a much, much better car this year. The team seems more focused. Sebastian and Kimi, they both seem more focused. Kimi had a few problems this weekend, but nothing that hindered him from getting that 4th place finish. He was never going to beat Bottas this weekend. Bottas was on it. But Bottas himself had his own problems. Seemed to have high pressures in the tyres, specifically in the first stint. After the first stint, Bottas seemed to get on with it, but by then Hamilton and Vettel got ahead of him and basically were the stars of the show this weekend. It always seems to be the case for a number 2 driver. I mean, Mercedes will never admit that Bottas is the number 2 driver for the team, but quite clearly he is. His teammate is a triple world champion, so, you know, it's like saying, you're so much better than me, but I'm still as looked upon favourably by a team as, say, someone who's won, like, for example, 3 world championships. Esteban Ocon of Force India, as I said earlier, is doing rather well for someone who was in a backmarker team last year. You know, he scored 3 10th places, and that's 3 points. You know, it cannot be discouraged what he's currently doing. It's not absolutely fantastic, but if you think about it, Force India have had 3 double points finishes. And for a team that, quite frankly, should have won a race by now, it's all they can hope for against the might of the top 6. As I said, if someone from the top 6 drivers, you know, the top 3 teams doesn't finish a race for whatever reason, you know, teams like Force India and Williams will pick up the slack, if you see what I mean. So Ocon doing pretty well. Pretty naughty by Lewis Hamilton to bring in, to stop and impede Ricciardo getting in. He sort of like cut across him to come into the pits. It may have been a last minute decision by Mercedes and or Hamilton, but a bit naughty. Penalty was justified. You know, you cannot do that in any form of racing and get away with it, and he didn't. It was a 5-second penalty. That's what it was, 5-second penalty. Could it have been a stop-go? Maybe in olden times it would have been. I say olden times, you know, 10, 15 years ago, it probably would have been a stop-go, or at least a drive-through. And I think the penalties are fairer these days in terms of those penalties that happen during a race. Again, if it wasn't for the 5-second penalty, would Hamilton have won this race? It's a question that needs to be asked, and it's also a question that Ferrari need to ask themselves as well. Bit of red mist from Jolyon Palmer of Renault when passing Danny Kvyat of Toro Rosso. Very aggressive, and maybe that's coming with the car, to be honest, because the car isn't all that great, and Hülkenberg quite rightly is outperforming him. He's a better driver. He's a more experienced driver. I mean, Hülkenberg did win Le Mans in 2016. Was part of that team that did win Le Mans, or 2015, one of the two. Definitely, questions do need to be asked. There's comments on Twitter saying, you know, why is he doing what he's doing? And quite frankly, it could be frustration building in as well. If he doesn't start to get better results, you could basically kiss his Formula One career goodbye. There's not many teams that would probably take him on if he were to leave or get booted out of the Renault team. You know, you might take him on as a cheap option to finance a better driver for your number one car. But quite frankly, Palmer isn't the greatest driver, but we'll see. So, like, I mean, if he was sitting in a Mercedes, obviously he'd be pretty good. But what I'm saying is that Palmer will probably not be in Formula One next year because A, there'll be cheaper alternatives, and B, there'll be alternatives that will bring in the funding that can maybe help get a better race result as the races go on. But as far as I can tell, Palmer already, I mean, we're only in race 3, we could be seeing his last days in F1. And now on to the most disappointing aspect of the weekend, and that is McLaren. I grew up watching Formula One, and the first memories I have are Senna and Prost going at it for the World Championship in 1988 and 1989. One of the more vivid memories I have, and first memories I have of F1, apart from Mansell winning at Silverstone, is the two McLarens coming together in Suzuka in 89, giving Prost the World Championship. Are they a long way away from those days, or what at the moment? They're now the worst team in Formula One. Sauber have finished races this year. McLaren have recorded, out of the 3 races, out of the 6 potential race finishes this year, McLaren have recorded 6 DNFs. Or 5 DNFs. I think Stoffel might have got through Australia or something like that. And it's now a celebration for McLaren if they finish a race. And quite frankly, for multiple time drivers and constructors champions, that is pathetic. It is absolutely pathetic. Alonso, you can hear he's disheartened on the radio. Basically, he was asked by his race engineer, 3/4 of the way through the race, how are the tyres? And Alonso's just like, do what you want. As if to say, do what you want, I really do not care right now. He's been given permission to race in the Indy 500, the big race in America, on the same weekend as the Monaco Grand Prix. The Monaco Grand Prix is like the most famous motorsports race outside of the Indy 500, really. He's been given special permission, and I think it will be with Team Andretti combined with McLaren and Honda or something like that. Button will replace him at Monaco, and you have to ask the questions now. If you're McLaren, obviously they let him do what he wants in return for maybe staying with the team. I really don't know, but if I was Fernando, I'd be talking to prospective employers, depending on what result he records in the Indy 500, of course. But you have to think that Fernando's looking at his future career out there, because he's not exactly tarnishing his reputation. I mean, he's fighting with everything he's got. You can see he is. But you can clearly tell that he's frustrated, the team's frustrated, and it's all to do. The aero package seems fine to me. The car itself, the chassis itself, it seems to be looking after its tyres relatively well, but the engine, the Honda engine, is awful. It really is the worst on the grid. I mean, as I said earlier, like 110 bph deficit to the Mercedes engine. So we're talking, 80 to 100 behind the other engines, the Renault, the Ferrari, and it seems that, if he thinks about it, and if his manager thinks about it, or I think still Flavio Briatore, I'm not sure, but if you're Fernando Alonso, you've got to be thinking, well, what's the point in me coming back to Formula One after my experience with the Indy 500? If he produces a decent enough result out there, then I would be going up to maybe Ganassi Racing, maybe Penske, maybe Andretti Racing, or, if those 3 still exist out there, and I'd be saying, look, I'm here, I scored a X place finish, and with a bit more time and a bit more experience out there, he could be you know, he could pull a Mansell. He could win the championship. Obviously not this year, but he might be able to win the championship next year. Because at the moment, McLaren and Honda specifically are not going to do anything of value whatsoever. Button's replacing him at Monaco. Could we see Button return to F1 full time? Because if I was Alonso, I'd be saying, no, I can't be bothered anymore. That clause in his contract says if McLaren are uncompetitive, he can leave at any time he wants. And quite frankly, the McLaren is the worst car out there. And, you know, through no fault of their own, they are faltering, and quite badly. I mean, Stoffel Van Dorn didn't even get on the grid. And for a team, as I say, that has won that many Drivers' Championships and Constructors' Championships, it's sickening to see. I actually predicted these troubles beginning as soon as Hamilton left the team. And they had their worst season for quite some time in 2013. Don't even think they got on the podium. They might have gone on the podium. I'll have to consult my season review. But after that, you know, they got on the podium in Australia in 2014. That was the first race of the season. They had, you know, double podium, second and third. But you've got to take into consideration that the Honda engine is the worst on the grid. Now, if what's written in the news, the press and everything is to be believed, is that Sauber will pick up these Honda engines next year and McLaren could very well be going back to Mercedes engines. If that's the case, then that is a failure for Honda, and it's the end of a relationship that, quite frankly, should be brilliant by now. Honda have to be thinking, and so do McLaren as well, that for the remainder of this season, not only is it damage limitation, but you have to think that, you know, what's wrong with going back to the 2016 spec engine? It may be down on power, but quite frankly, it cannot be any worse than what they're using at the moment. And for the final aspect of the checkered flag this time about, you have to consider now that 3 races in, you know, it's going to be Hamilton versus Vettel for this year's championship. That's basically the only conclusion that can be drawn, unless either team/driver has a really bad run of form, that these two are going to be fighting for the championship. It's either been a first or second place finish for either driver. It's looking to be a really interesting fight. And as has been mentioned in commentary in both Channel 4 and Sky, we've never seen this fight before. We've never seen Lewis versus Sebastian for the championship. It's always been Vettel versus Alonso, Alonso versus Hamilton, Hamilton versus Rosberg. And it could produce some really interesting Grand Prix. You know, the first half of these races tends to be quite interesting so far this season. Okay, we've only had 3 races, but you have to take into consideration that, you know, this is going to be the fight for the championship this year. The respective number 2s will play their part. Bottas is better than Raikkonen at the moment because the second Mercedes is better than the second Ferrari. I think they're both equal in terms of talent. Obviously, Bottas hasn't won a race yet. He probably will sometime, specifically if Hamilton and or Vettel falter, because there will be a period of time where there will be gremlins, or, you know, there's an accident or something, and when the pressure's on, will the 2 Mercedes crash into each other like they did last year? So we'll have to see what happens. Next time out, I do believe, is Russia, and that's not for a couple of weeks. So I thank you very much for watching this episode of Formula One Talk. I apologise about the mistakes with regards to the term place penalty, and of course seconds, you know, 5-second penalty. It's not difficult, but most of the time when it terms of a 5 blah penalty, it's usually a 5 grid penalty, so I do apologise for that. Leave your thoughts, comments and suggestions. Like this video, if you can throw me a like, that'd be great. Make your comments and make your suggestions. Like, comment and subscribe to the channel. I will be posting up another video soon when we have a couple of weeks break with regards to Lewis Hamilton. Not necessarily a profile video, but I'd like to do a retrospective, not necessarily of his career, but I want to do a video with regards to the fan reaction to him and the overall consensus of what he is and who he is. So that'll be coming soon on the F1 Talk channel. I can't tell you when. Like I say, in my first video, I now work in a care home where I can do up to 12.5-hour shifts on a daily basis, or on a bi-daily basis, and it doesn't leave you a lot of time for thinking about a video, much less recording one. So thank you very much indeed for watching. I'll see you next time for more Formula 1 talk.